And I'll give you okay.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brendan Carney, and I'm standing here with Althea Wong-Acorn, and we're WalkBoston's Deputy Directors of Advocacy and Operations. Is that Deputy Director? So I digress. We're so happy to be able to be here with you all for our first in-person annual celebration since 2019. As a statewide organization, ensuring partners and supporters across the Commonwealth can participate in this event remotely is also something we definitely intend to continue. So thank you, everyone that's also joining us remotely. As we look back on the past year, and frankly, the past 4 years, we realized that for the last annual celebration we had in person, Wendy Lamb was still the executive director. Hi, Wendy. Hi, there she is. So, and Stacy Butel. Where's Stacy Butel? So, hi, Stacy. When you and I closed the office door in Old City Hall for what ended up being the last time, Thursday, March 12th, 2020, I actually took a video, which is weird. We both probably didn't expect that you'd have the distinct honor of leading 3 annual celebrations from your attic office. We're so glad to have you with us tonight for the first annual celebration with us at the podium. In all seriousness, though, we're so grateful to both of you and appreciate the support that you're still showing us and the organization by being with us here tonight. Let's give them a round of applause. 2022 was a big year for Walk Boston. We conducted our first walk audit in PED 101 with Caminata Seguras in collaboration with Green Roots in East Boston. The findings will support participants of the Caminata Seguras in advocating for the built environment changes they need to improve walkability to parks and open spaces in East Boston. Walk Boston mapped out safe and inviting walking routes and wayfinding signs for residents of several Boston housing developments. The Boston Medical Center Community Walks Project, a bunch of the team is here tonight, seeks to understand the factors that encourage people to pick healthy activities like walking around their neighborhoods. And speaking of wayfinding, we assisted the city of Medford in designing and implementing a wayfinding program in and around Medford Square as part of the MassDOT Shared Streets and Spaces grant to show how close many destinations are on foot. Sidewalk snow removal is crucial. Walkability must be a year-round priority. In 2022, the city of Boston expanded their sidewalk snow clearing program. I'm sure just the threat of the amount of new sidewalk snow plows that would be unleashed on those unsuspecting flakes absolutely worked based on the amount of snow Boston received this year. We applaud the administration and public works staff for their planning efforts here. And a special thanks to Councilor Kenzie Bach, who really got the ball rolling. Big round of applause for Kenzie Bach. We partnered with the Prevention Research Center at UMass Chan Medical School, the Worcester Department of Public Health, and local organizations to launch a pilot of our new Walk Audit Academy video series program in Worcester. I'll share more about that later in our staff 1 minute, 1 slide portion. Walk Boston has developed several tools inspired by our collaborations with travel trainers and family caregivers. Our How to Report a Problem tool provides guidance on which officials to contact when you encounter problems with your local infrastructure, depending on the jurisdiction. At the very end of the legislative session, the Act to Reduce Traffic Fatalities was finally signed into law. The bill has been a focus of the Massachusetts Vision Zero Coalition for nearly a decade now and includes sections on safe passing, truck safety devices, meaning side guards and mirrors, improved crash reporting when vulnerable road users are hit, and speed limits. Mass Bike, Galen's here somewhere. Hey, Galen. Recently put together a great webinar that explains sections of the bill. We highly recommend you check that out. Yes on 4, the Work and Family Mobility Act also passed this year, which allows qualified residents, regardless of immigration status, to apply for a standard driver's license. This law improves mobility and ensures more drivers on our road are trained and licensed. 2022 also saw the continued growth of our monthly resource sharing and educational WalkMassachusetts network calls. You may have read or heard about our 2022 crash report that was released last week. The messaging is even stronger due to the comments and constructive feedback that we got at last month's network meeting. Thank you to all participants, and please do join us for a future meeting, third Wednesdays at 1. About that crash report, you may have seen some of the coverage that it received at the end of last week. 2022 was an extremely deadly year for pedestrians, a 35% increase in fatal pedestrian crashes compared to 2021. As shown in last year's report, older adults were again disproportionately represented. And this year, we also analyzed the data from an environmental justice lens, found that 71% of fatal pedestrian crashes occurred in EJ census block groups. All of us should be asking our state and local elected officials what they are doing to make streets safer. We just heard from MassDOT and we'll be meeting with Secretary Fiandaca and her leadership team next week, along with other advocates. We're very pleased to hear that. I'm now going to hand over the mic to my co-deputy director, Althea Wong, Acorn.
All right. Thank you, Brendan. And thank you all for being here. There are so many people that we'd like to thank tonight for their support, and we simply don't have time for me to list each of them, which is why their names have been prominently displayed this evening, though not at this particular moment. But I would like to take a moment and thank a few key people right now. First off, you just heard a lightning fast summation of the past year. And I can say that this work was absolutely not done by just the two of us. In addition to Stacy and Wendy, who Brendan already thanked, I want to thank our two newest team members, Senior Program Manager Yolanda Spinola and Program Coordinator Ava Diamond. I also want to thank our board under the leadership of Betsy Johnson for your support during this transition. If I could get each of our board members to raise your hands and wave so we can give a round of applause for them as well. I also want to note that if you'd like to be added to this thank you speech next year, we are actively hiring, so now's your chance. Walk Boston also would not be where we are today if it weren't for the partnerships we have formed across the state over all these years. Again, there's simply no way for me to mention every community member, nonprofit, municipal staff, or foundation, but I would be remiss if I didn't make an attempt. Thank you to the Bar Foundation for supporting us and so many of our transportation partners, some of whom are also here tonight, and for giving us the resources to grow and evolve our organization. Thank you to the Point 32 Health Foundation, the Boston Medical Center, and Boston Children's Hospital for your support funding our major programs, some of which you'll hear more about very shortly. We appreciate how all of you are creating the space for us to form genuine, trusting relationships in the communities that we are working with. These relationships are the key to ensuring that the built environment changes implemented in neighborhoods across the state are those that are wanted by local residents. I want to thank our partners in the Massachusetts Vision Zero Coalition, Livable Streets, Mass Bike, Transit Matters, Transportation for Massachusetts, the Safe Roads Alliance, the Boston Cyclists Union, and more. I know I've already thanked some of you in personally tonight, but on behalf of the entire team here, we are so thankful for the work that all of you do to help us advocate for change. We are also grateful for our fellow nonprofit organizations, including Green Roots in East Boston, the Mattapan Food and Fitness Coalition, Walk Bite Worcester, Walk Bite Springfield, the Hilltown CDC, and so many more that help deepen our community impact. Your work and dedication is inspiring. It is also my job as a lead fundraiser for the organization to make clear to everyone tonight that yes, we are a nonprofit, and yes, all of the work that you've heard about and will be hearing more about tonight is dependent on the support of all of you. And yes, we do hope that you'll make another donation tonight. For those of you in person, you may already have spoken to Ava. Give a wave, Ava. She's able to help you make that donation at any time tonight, including now. You can donate via cash, credit card, even checks. There's also QR codes on table signs that you can scan. And no, we haven't forgotten those of you online. There's a link that's being dropped into the chat that goes right to our donate page. We also have a pledge from our board. Thank you so very much for that. To match the first $5,000 of donations that are made tonight. So if you're looking to stretch your donation to the fullest, now is the perfect time. As a special treat, we will also be raffling off several copies signed by our keynote speaker, Karilyn Crockett, of her book, People Before Highways, to anyone who makes a donation tonight, including virtually. And I really hope many of you will take me up on this, as now is such a critical time for walkability and transportation advocacy. You heard about our 2022 crash report and the grim rise in pedestrian fatalities, which shows how urgent the need is for change. But it's also important to see the potential for the year ahead. We have a brand new administration, as well as momentum with the passage of the Act to Reduce Traffic Fatalities and Yes on 4. So now is the time to act and make our voices heard. So please help us make a difference. Help us make Massachusetts safer, more accessible for all. On that note, it is now my pleasure to get the show moving by inviting up our first speaker of the night, our indispensable board president, Betsy Johnson.
I hope I'm on. Okay. Thank you, Althea and Brendan. It's wonderful to be here with all of you tonight, as it's been so long since we were last able to do this. I first want to express my gratitude also to Wendy and to Stacy. Wendy, we know this isn't goodbye, if for no other reason. You supposedly retired in 2019, and yet here you are again, still here. And seriously, we know that walkability and advocacy are part of your DNA, and we expect to continue to run into you at meetings of Alston I-90 in your role as an America Walks board member, and just as Wendy Landman, private citizen, out to do good for the world. And Stacy, the specifics may be a little different, but we know that you have, we haven't seen the last of you either. For those of you who don't know, Stacy just began a new phase of her career as the Senior Director of the Nature in the City program for Mass Audubon, a position which we swear she wrote herself. In that role, we know that we will be working side by side with her soon as we all continue to make Massachusetts more livable, vibrant, and green. Thank you both for your years of service to Walk Boston and for preparing us for the next chapter of the organization. You have left behind some big shoes to fill. So on that topic, though, you may have heard that we are currently searching for our next executive director. We're looking for an individual to lead us into an exciting next phase, which will include implementing our newly developed strategic plan, expanding our reach statewide, and continuing our advocacy and organizing efforts to support in the support of safe pedestrian infrastructure and public policy. If you think you're the person to fill these shoes and take on these challenges, or you know someone, please come find me later and we'll talk. 2022 was as busy a year for Walk Boston as I can remember. In addition to all the programs that you've just heard about from Brendan, some of the most important work we did was internal. At our last annual celebration, I told you with support from the Bar Foundation, we were undertaking a new strategic planning process. I'm happy to say that the strategic plan is now finished. It's available on our website. And we're thrilled with the result and have already gotten to work on the new goals. When we began to craft our new strategic plan, we identified these three key questions. One, how can we effectively address racial equity? Two, where geographically should we focus our work? And three, how can we evaluate the impact we are having? To answer these questions, the answers to these questions did not radically change our viewpoints or the direction of the organization, but they did lead to increased clarity on how we could be most effective, how we could impact the most people, and how we could further expand our reach across the state. Our mission, which has not changed, to make walking safer and easier in Massachusetts, to encourage better health, a cleaner environment, and more vibrant communities is unchanged. Sorry, change the page. But we have expanded on this with a vision of a Massachusetts where people walking, no matter their race, identity, age, ability, or lived experience, feel safe, connected, and valued on the streets and sidewalks. And we have defined our core values of community, equity, and partnership. These are going to be part of our tagline going forward. With this clear vision for the future, we created three long-term goals. One, advocate for inclusive, safe and enjoyable places for people to walk. 2, work in places where people walking have the greatest need. And 3, achieve policy and built environment change that is noticeable, replicable, and impactful. Our programs all relate back to these important goals, programs such as the Walk Audit Academy and Walk Massachusetts Network. Both of these programs show how Walk Boston has evolved over the years. Our Walk Academy was designed to be replicable and to empower others to advocate for change when Boston isn't in the room, to share the tools of the Walk audit process so that we can do more than our staff can on its own. And the organization I'm also involved with, Walk Bike locally, Walk Bike Springfield, is already planning our use of these new tools and materials. The Walk Boston Network, as you heard, brings together voices from across the state and together workshop solutions and share best practices so that we can go home to our communities and get to work with our neighbors and local leaders. As a resident of Springfield, the growth and evolution of the Walk Boston Network is something of which I'm particularly proud and happy about. In summary, we are stronger together. Everyone in this room is responsible for making this organization more effective. So thank you. And I am so proud to be here with all of our partners tonight. So I'm now going to pass the mic. I actually have Brendan.
You do.
Back to Brendan.
You can give that to Althea.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Who will be starting the one tradition that we started, 6 years ago?
That sounds about right.
About 6, right? The 1 minute, 1 slide portion of our event.
Great. Thanks, Thanks, Betsy. Really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you so much for your leadership, Betsy. So we started 1 minute, 1 slide a few years ago as a way to share more about programs we're doing, pass the mic to other staff members, and challenge us to be concise, which is sometimes a problem for us at Walk Boston. So yeah, think of it as, a real challenge for public comment. Maybe Major League Baseball borrowed their pitch clock from us. I can't say, but we're gonna dive right in here. So we each have 1 minute, and Ava is brave enough to have a clock where she's going to call us out if we are going long. She has a 10-second warning, and then she has a red card where we get dinged if we go over 60 seconds. So I'll be first, and I'm going to talk about the Walk Audit Academy pilot we did in Worcester. So whenever you're ready, Ava, I can go. So great. So we launched this in Worcester to train 5 groups to lead walk audits and implement change in a flipped classroom style. We made videos where people were able to learn at their own pace. The short videos and supporting materials are available to them. We're not teaching at them. They then created their own routes. They invited participants. They led their own walk audits. We, offered support throughout all of November. We had 3 sessions on Zoom for group feedback and discussion. We then held Zoom office hours 1 time a week, lunchtime and post-work. We then had a community report out at the Worcester Senior Center in January. About 50 attendees, including transportation, mobility, leadership, and staff, were there to hear participants share their findings. Could your community be the next to host this effort? We really hope so. Thanks so much. Okay, and no pressure, guys. I nailed it. The next up is Yolanda Spinola, who's going to talk about connecting kids and families to Parks and Open Spaces grant.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. He's an expert. He's been doing it for a while. I'm brand new to this, so it's my first time. Don't start yet. Okay, great. So I want to tell you about connecting kids and families to parks in East Boston. I've been working with Green Roots, and there's a new group that's coming together, which is coming at the Seguras. They are a walking group that's walking around the community weekly, predominantly Spanish-speaking residents of East Boston, and they're looking to see how they can improve their access to green spaces, to open spaces. And it's an awesome opportunity for them to share some of the challenges that they're dealing with. And we hosted a walk audit on November 8th, and they identified a variety of different challenges. And we're going to continue to meet with them as the weather gets better. It's about 7 to 10 individuals that meets weekly. And that's it. And I'm going to hand it off to...
Nice job.
Great. I'm going to hand it off to Ava to tell you a little bit about continuing education and networking that we're doing.
Hello. Okay, I'll begin. So, Walk Boston is always seeking to expand our statewide network of advocacy organizations, municipal staff, elected officials, community groups, and residents who are working on walking. We aim to create spaces for collaborative conversations that guide our work while encouraging supporters to exchange advocacy techniques, member recruitment strategies, and approaches for securing improvements to the built environment. If you want to participate in these conversations, come to our events. We have our Walk Massachusetts network, which meets monthly on Zoom, and anyone can listen in and participate in monthly calls. Our Not Just Books book club started a few years ago, and it allows us to dive deeply into a chosen article, podcast, basically something that's not just a book, but also sometimes is a book. Between these regular meetings, Walk Boston explores topics ranging from 15-minute cities to the challenges of sidewalk snow removal to the legacy of Jane Jacobs. There's so much to look forward to in the coming years, lots of opportunities to learn and connect with others. Keep an eye out for our next Walk Massachusetts meeting, our second annual Bob Sloan Walk this summer, and our next Talk the Walk discussion session.
Nailed it. Nice job. And next up is Althea Wong Acorn, who's going to give you a pitch.
Which means I'm probably going to mess this up since everyone else did it already. All right. Well, now that you've heard about some of the work that we're doing, I would like to spend my 1 minute to recruit you or someone you would recommend to us to join the board. In the wake of our strategic plan, we embarked on a self-assessment of our board's strengths and weaknesses. Through that, we identified several areas as those of greatest need. Most notably, we would love to recruit some more people in the fields of public health, climate resiliency, HR, fundraising, transportation engineering, and communications. We're also looking for people from all backgrounds and demographics and from across the state, though our name is Walk Boston. We work from the Cape to the Hill Towns and back again, and our board president lives in Springfield. So if you're interested in getting more involved in advocating for walkability and change, if you're like me and you simply identify as a pedestrian, sorry, Galen, I'm still not comfortable on a bike. If you're a subject matter expert in one of these areas, or if you think you can help us make a difference, let's talk. You can talk to me or one of our board members, all of whom have helpful name tags. You can also get your feet wet by joining one of our committees. Either way, we hope you'll join us. Thank you.
Nicely done.
And we're done.
Very nicely done. That was fantastic. All right, well, it's back to me. Thanks, Althea. Now, we've been talking a lot tonight about our work across the state, and we've dropped a couple of hints about and alluding to some big news. Well, the time for that announcement is now, and I'd like Betsy to come back up here for that announcement. Betsy, from the moment you joined the board, you have talked my ear off about this. I mean, you have championed the need for us to embrace our statewide presence. You've been a steady voice saying that we're about far more than Boston. And Betsy, tonight is the night. During our strategic planning process, we spoke to partners and community members all over the state. And we kept hearing the same thing over and over. Our name didn't reflect the scope of our work. I know I, like everyone on our staff, has introduced themselves by saying, "Hi, I work for Walk Boston. We're a statewide pedestrian advocacy organization." The assumption that we only work in Boston is understandable. It's in our name. But the reality is we've been working statewide for over a decade. The feedback from our partners and supporters, combined with the vision we have for Massachusetts, led us to a single conclusion. It really is time for a new name. Betsy, can you hit that button? Thank you. Yes, we are Walk Massachusetts. Betsy, it's turning it over to you. So, yeah.
Okay. Doing the fundraising pitch now.
Yeah.
Okay.
You said you
Okay,
told me
okay,
you've been
okay.
waiting years for this moment.
Okay.
So much so I wrote it down and you're speechless. This is unbelievable. Betsy Johnson is speechless. Please make a note of this.
As especially someone who lived in downtown Boston for so many years and then moved to Springfield. And I'll tell you, it was Western Massachusetts, which the Pioneer Valley, the Connecticut Valley considers itself to be, and the Berkshires is even further out there, hate Boston. Boston gets everything. Boston. So yes, I think, so yes, I am speechless about this. But our transition to Walk Massachusetts is not going to actually be able to happen overnight, but will be rolled out over the next year.
I would go insane if we had to roll that out overnight.
So, you know, we've already told you got to get this done, and, you know, everything on the website has to be changed. Everything, all the stationery has to be changed, you know. So it's going to be a little change.
But you'll be seeing it.
Yes.
You'll be seeing it.
The change, and mostly the change needs your help. And so, yes, that means donations. You've already heard this once tonight. And so with that, I'm going to invite my the secretary of our board, Pucci, to come up here and help me with this.
Thank you. No one told me there'd be a microphone. I like talking with my hands. Let's see if I can pull that off.
Would you like to stand?
Yeah, it's all good. Good evening. Like Betsy said, my name is Pucci Wong. I'm a board member at Walk Boston, but excuse me, now Walk Massachusetts. I'm really excited. Now that you've heard about some of the amazing projects that the organization has been working on over the past year and about our plans for an even greater statewide presence for Walk Massachusetts moving forward, you'd be right in assuming that we've got our work cut out for us. It will take the combined efforts of our board, our staff, our new executive director, as well as countless community members and municipal staff across the state to make our vision a reality. And it will take even more than that. To be successful, we need your support. Walk Massachusetts is a nonprofit organization, and we depend on the donations of all of you to make Massachusetts a safer place. So why is this work so important, you might ask? Because everyone in this room is a pedestrian at some point in their day. When we step off the T, when it's actually running, if you drive a car to meet friends for dinner, you park, and then you become a pedestrian. If you use a wheelchair to get around, you use the same sidewalks and crosswalks. When we get off our bikes, take our dogs for walks, go out for a run, we're pedestrians. We all need safe streets and sidewalks. I live in East Boston, not far from Bennington Street, a high-speed and dangerous arterial road where cars routinely speed and pedestrians face double threat crossings. My fellow board member, Emma, lives in Charlestown. She's told us about how she, like many parents in the city, walk her children to school. But what should be a simple and pleasant morning ritual has become at best a headache, and at worst, a genuinely dangerous experience. You may have read some of the stories about the saga that is the North Washington Street Bridge replacement project. For those who may not be familiar, Keynote Square is quite simply universally terrible for everyone using it. Cars, buses, bikes, scooters, walkers, you name it. What we do at Walk Massachusetts is to help make sure that roads like Bennington Street and intersections like Keynote Square are made safer for all of us. By advocating for simple, low-cost mitigation measures like signal changes, fresh paint, raised crosswalks, we're making it safer for kids to go to school, for our parents and grandparents to cross the street. This is why we're asking for your support, to make our state safer for everyone. So please, if you're able to make a donation tonight, we would greatly appreciate it. And I was also just told before I took the mic that the board is actually raising their match from $5,000 to $10,000 now. So there's just really no better time to make sure your board or your donation dollars go the furthest possible way they can. So please do give if you're able. So with that, thank you. And I'll hand it back to Brendan to pass out the hardware.
Fantastic. I would like to say, we said we were going to start the Golden Shoes at 7 o'clock. Time check, it's 6:59. So we're doing well here. We're doing well. Thank you so much, Pucci. So now we're going to start the Golden Shoe Awards. And here's how this is going to work. I'll invite each group up. Someone in this crowd here will introduce them and say why they're getting that award. And then one person from each group is welcome to give 2 minutes worth of remarks. Fred, we mean 2 minutes. So we appreciate you. After receiving your award, if the group could please move to the right side, get your picture taken. And to begin, can the team from MEVA please come forward? One from MEVA, great. forward. Walk Boston participates in the Regional Transit Authority Advocates Coalition, led by the Mass Public Health Association and Transportation for Massachusetts. We've really been learning about the importance of the 15 regional transit authorities. RTAs are the lifeline to residents in over 250 communities beyond the reach of the MBTA, particularly people of color, older adults, low-income communities, and people with disabilities or limited mobility. The RTA Advancement Bill, which is at the State House right now, will pave the way for more accessible and reliable transit that gets people out of cars onto buses, moving the state closer to realizing its climate goals. Tonight, we're celebrating some of the best of what an RTA can do, a collaboration that resulted in a fare-free bus pilot that became permanent in the Merrimack Valley. Along with increasing accessibility for low-income riders and the frequency of bus operations, the recent rebrand of the MVRTA into MIVA deliberately speaks to the community's Spanish-speaking riders. From its tagline, "Let's go, vamos," to the bus's cheerful new color scheme, MIVA's visionary approach to public transit has tremendously increased ridership across the valley. Congratulations, Noah. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Brendan. Thank you to all my friends at WalkMassachusetts.
First person to say that.
It's nice, and it's an honor to represent both the transit authority, because 100% of our riders start as pedestrians, and to represent an area maybe just a little bit outside of the 128 belt. The Merrimack Valley, by the way, is a beautiful area. It's notable for being both culturally and linguistically diverse. We recently joined a fabulous organization, Latinos in Transit, and even they are surprised that a small city in Massachusetts is 83% Latino, more so than communities in Texas, Florida, California, New Mexico. So we've embraced that. We've added a little bit of a Caribbean flavor to it, but that's part of it. I also want to say, just point of personal privilege, that it's an honor to share the stage with one of my heroes, and I have very few heroes, probably can count them on one hand, maybe Three Finger Brown can count them on one hand, but Fred Salvucci is one of them. I think also, just so he knows, the color scheme, while I didn't completely choose it, it is based a little bit on housing in Old San Juan, Puerto Rico, which I had the privilege of working on when I was a graduate student with Fred. So it all comes around. I think what I appreciate about this award is that we got a lot of press for going fare free, and that was, as we like to say, wicked important. But it's not just, if you go fare free and don't touch all the other things that transit does, it's not going to work. If you're not all in, it's not going to work. So that's what we did. Part of this design, it's not just prettying up the buses. It's making a statement of what transit looks like. Our buses before this looked exactly the same as mail trucks. And no disrespect to my brothers and sisters in the US Postal Service, but that's not the look we were going for. I think when I started in this position, I went around to a number of community groups and I asked, what do we do well? What do we do not so well? And I wanted to hear both. What I was unprepared for was the answer, we have no friggin' idea because we don't know what you guys do. And we realized we needed to be more visible. That's what our buses look like, what our, that we're providing the service. We doubled our frequencies in Lawrence. We were only able to do that. We're one of the few transit authorities in this country that's been able to grow our driver base in the face of a driver shortage. One of the reasons is it's taken the burden of being fare enforcement off of the drivers, so they're happier. We've got drivers who come, we're trying to poach from other agencies, certainly not the T, but we do get some riders from the T, some drivers from the T who are happier. Now, yes, we also installed a massage chair and a high-end coffee machine in the driver's lounge. But these are the people that our riders see. They don't think of me. They think of the drivers. That's the ambassadors for the agency. So I just want to say, and I just want to, if I could say one thing that's top secret to be kept only in this room. One of the
we're
things,
streaming online, so
right. No, I just want to say that we made a bold bet, and thanks to my board, thanks to our other partners who couldn't be here because it's transportation and they're in Lawrence and Haverhill. But so I want to thank the mayor of Lawrence, Brian DePena. I want to thank the executive director for Merrimack Valley Regional Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, Gerard Witten. I want to thank Leslie Melendez at Groundwork Lawrence, and I want to thank my board, and I want to thank my entire team who really are the ones who bore the brunt of this. But the top secret is we made the calculation that, like every other transit authority in the world, we have what the bean counters like to call a structural deficit. And that means we have enough money now, but in about a year and a half, 2 years, we're not. We've made, now a lot of my peers have made the calculation, I better hold back and not and spend as little money as possible so that it lasts as long as it can. We made the opposite bet. We said we want to spend as much money now so we can put the best possible service we can put on the road, because maybe it'll be an easier ask when we go hat in hand to our friends in Beacon Hill in a year and a half, 2 years. But I'm going to need advocates. I'm going to need champions. The great thing about RTAs, we're small enough we can be incubators. We can test out ideas in ways that maybe it's a little harder if you have a 6,000 person agency. So I'm going to need you. I'm going to come back to you. And thank you very much. Much appreciated.
fantastic. Thanks for that.
Though that was longer than 2 minutes.
Yeah, duly noted.
I'm setting the stage for Fred.
Setting the stage for Fred. Great. So can the MassTrails team come up? And I believe Josh Ostroff is also here. He's going to say a word or two.
Thank you all so much. Congratulations to Noah and Miva. I'm Josh Ostroff. I work in Newton, Director of Transportation Planning. I know many of you from past roles and have had the opportunity to work with Walk Massachusetts since 2011 or so. And thank you for the great work you do. So we heard a little bit about the vision of from the strategic plan of community and equity and partnership. And those words so well described the work that this great team at MassTrails has been doing for the past several years. What MassTrails has been able to achieve by identifying the obstacles to trail making and having very targeted remedies by funding design, land acquisition, construction, photography, breakout rooms. Oh, we're not doing that. Okay, sorry. Is really extraordinary. You know, my home community of Natick has been the beneficiary of a MassTrails grant to achieve projects that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And that's happened all across the state. 259 projects, over $24 million, the kind of seed money or to get things over the finish line that's so important. Trails help connect us. They connect communities. They really help breathe life into regions. We know, I think, by the people in this room understand what trails really mean for our Commonwealth. But it's the MassTrails team that's really helping make that a reality. I've had the privilege to know Joel Barrera, the impresario of MassTrails, for many years. And if there's one person who could talk a dog off a meat wagon, it's Joel. But it's the, or is there a vegan analog to that? So. But it's the folks at the four agencies, the EA and Department of Energy and DCR and Mass DOT that have really kept this going and will forever. And it's so exciting to see the kind of collaboration that, you know, we in government talk about it, but it's not that easy to do. People gravitate towards their silos, not just in government, but it's most impactful when it happens in government. So by reaching across agencies, by working together, by reaching out to municipalities, working with advocates, you're really able to achieve extraordinary things. So I'm really happy to represent Walk Boston and granting you this award.
Walk Massachusetts.
Could we rewind that? I'm really happy to get this longtime organization, Walk Massachusetts, to recognize MassTrails. So congratulations to you all. Great work. Keep at it. Thank you for all you do.
All right, who gets the mic?
Thank you very much. And Josh, thank you very much for that introduction. You said it all in such a good way. So thank you.
More time for
Well, right. So thank you to Walk Massachusetts for this award. We are truly honored. So my name is Stephanie Cooper. I'm the Undersecretary for Environment, Energy, and Environmental Affairs. I'm in a new position, but I've been part of this work in this community for a long time. And it's great to see so many people in person, and great to be celebrating the accomplishments of this incredible team. And so the sort of the indicator or the measurement of how are we doing, as Josh said so eloquently, we're trying to invest in every aspect of shared use pathways. So building, extending, caring for, working with communities, working with groups like Walk Massachusetts, and many of you, the partners who are around the state who do this incredible work. And the indicator that we're so proud of is that we have over 900 miles of shared use pathways across the Commonwealth, and 42% of our residents live within half a mile of a pathway. So that's pretty good, but we have more to do, right? And that's why we're going to keep going with this work, and why we're so strongly committed to it. And it's about, connecting people. It's about supporting healthy communities. It's about investing in people-powered transportation, and so importantly, driving down emissions and dealing with climate change, right? So we are, like I said, honored to be here, and I'm going to give a little bit of airtime to Jackie here, but I really want to celebrate the team who is here, who, as Josh said, truly do work together really seamlessly, and I've had the honor of watching this group grow over time. And the last thing I want to say before I hand over the mic is that I do bring greetings from EEA Secretary Rebecca Tepper and DCR Commissioner Doug Rice, who had hoped to be here tonight, but they're here with us in spirit. So Jackie, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Jackie D. Wolf. I work at the Massachusetts Department of Transportation and have the honor of being the co-chair of the Trails team. There's a huge group here. We have the pleasure and fun of getting to meet all the time. And it's also worth just noting, we talk about this stat of 42% of people who live within a half mile. That's about a 6 to 10 minute walk, but it's not enough, and it's not good enough. And it's how can we get more people access and ability to access the trails and also get to where they want to go on this network. So we have 40 miles under construction, another 115 funded for construction, and so much more to go. But it's really everyone in this room and far beyond this room that makes it possible. We're just taking your good ideas and making them happen. And I just want to recognize all of our colleagues who aren't here and who are the people actually constructing these trails, who are out there maintaining them, who are doing right away in environmental permitting and all the things day in and day out to make these all possible. So stick with us. It's a great program, but we have a lot more to do. And thank you for all your great ideas that we get the pleasure to help construct and make happen. And congrats, everyone.
Thank you so much. Can I invite Ann Hirschfang, Betsy Johnson, and Fred Salvucci up?
Whichever combination you prefer.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Didn't even know I was going to say anything.
Fred, if you could stand on this side, just because of the white screen. So.
And we have a present.
Thank you.
What you told me. How you didn't know? Why you?
Well, I didn't even know I was going to say anything. So I apologize for any blundering.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Ann Hirschfang.
Founder of Walk Boston.
Along-
Among the founders.
Ann Hirschfang is one of the co-founders of Walk Boston.
Along with, please stand up, Dorothea Haas.
Also in the crowd is co-founder Dorothea Haas.
Yes.
And if you could just make sure to speak right into the microphone for
There
people
were
online.
5 of us sitting around a table at Jake Worf's having a beer down the street from the transportation building and thinking about Ottawa and what we should do in Massachusetts and founding around that table, Walk Boston. So that was a lot of fun. It's my pleasure to introduce Fred, whom I've known for a very long time and whom I met in a most unusual way. I was part of the anti-highway movement because they were going to build a 4-lane highway at the end of my street in the South End, and I'd gotten involved. And Fred was involved via Cambridge and then Boston. And the memorable moment was when the whole anti-highway group was sitting around talking and talking and talking and talking. And I said something and they were talking and talking and talking and talking. And finally, after about 15 minutes, Fred said, let's go back to what Anne said. And in the age, I mean, you all are a lot younger than that, but in the age, nobody paid any attention to women at all, which was clear in how they didn't pay any attention to me, except for Fred. And it has made me feel fond of Fred for decades. And I could say a lot more. I have a lot of amusing things I could say about Fred, which I won't do. I was his undersecretary for 5 years, and it was a great pleasure. But Fred has the ability to think of what should be done, to figure out how to do it, to figure out how to get the communities affected involved, and how to get the legislature behind what needs to be done. He is just a brilliant strategist with the kindest aims of anybody I know. So, off the top of my head, that's what I think about Fred.
I'm going to summarize some of this by reading the plaque. For your lifelong work as a civil engineer, educator, transportation advocate, and coalition builder, your tireless dedication and attention to detail has improved the well-being, connectivity, and prosperity of the region and continues to inspire us today. Thank you. There you go.
Well, thank you so much. The 2 minutes is a joke, right?
We tried.
Thank you so much, Anne. You're going to blow my reputation as a male chauvinist. Several things I wanted to say. I'll try to say them quickly. First, today's a tragically historic day, or tragic is maybe, but we lost Mel King last weekend, and the ceremony of his life was held today. Mel has been a real presence in the city. I often disagreed with Mel on strategy, on tactics, but there was never question about Mel's energy and commitment to the city. He's really been kind of the symbol of community activism that so many of us have benefited from and participated in. So I just wanted to begin by recognizing what we all owe to Mel King. When we were doing the project in San Juan, Puerto Rico called Tren Urbano, which Josh referred to, which was a great project, we all enjoyed it. Ken Krookemeyer invited Mel to San Juan to meet with the Secretary of Transportation and speak to community groups about the experience in the Southwest Corridor and community participation. And Mel, who loved these kind of Zen constructs, said to Secretary Pesquera, this project will be as great as the opposition it engenders in the community. Think about that from, Pesquera said, oh, thank you, I think, but there's a strange truth in that observation, and change offends some people, and usually they're powerful, and the guts to stand up to change things has to include the willingness to lose. if you only pick the fights you can win, you're not going to move the needle very much. You got to see what's important and walk toward it. I just want to say a couple of things about Anne. Well, let me come back to Lawrence, just to remind all of you. In 1913, there was a historic Lawrence strike over the 8-hour day. That was a milestone in the labor movement, and the Bread and Roses movement comes out of Lawrence. So Lawrence has a long history of being a leader, and I'm really thrilled that you guys up there are leading again. On Anne, I'll just say a couple of things we've sort of collaborated on. One, after we had won the fight against the highways and got Governor Sargent to make a heroic decision to stop the highways, and significantly not just to stop the highways, but to shift funding to public transportation, recognizing that people do have to get around. You can't just say no, you got to say yes to something. And so one of the things that we said yes to was doing the Southwest Corridor Orange Line relocation. So then Mike Dukakis won, and I become Secretary of Transportation, and Anne, in a polite way, invites me to visit some of her friends at her house and say, so what are you going to do with this Orange Line? Well, we're going to move it over, and you have this open cut there that's 5 tracks wide, and only a couple of them are being used for rail. So we're just going to put 2 tracks there for the Orange Line. And it'll be great because you'll have a transit station right down the street. And they said, and we're going to have, instead of 1 noisy, smelly train per hour, we're going to have Orange Line trains every 6 minutes making noise with this open cut dividing our community. We're going to stop you if you try to do that. I was really depressed. I said, oh my God, they do know how to stop things. So I figured out that I had a choice. I could either fight Anne and her friends, probably lose, but if I won, be ashamed for the rest of my life of this mess that I had helped to build. Or I could take a chance that we'd be able to find the money to actually do it right by putting it deeper and building a park on the roof. And so thank you, Anne, and your neighbors for saving me from the biggest blunder I almost ever made. It's the I always take people that are visiting the city to see the park, and I always describe it as the best fight I ever lost. So thank you, Anne, for beating me up and saving me from that. A second thing that Anne and I were involved with that actually involved Mel, after this incredible string of victories that you never could have believed that we would have been able to stop the highways and shift the money to transit and getting the transit to be sensitive to the community, especially the stuff that Tony Pangaro and Ken Crookmeyer did all up and down the Southwest Corridor with the open space and well-designed stations. And we've got this long string of luck, and then there's this tradition that had been started of having an art installation in the transit stations. A very nice tradition. All of a sudden, there's a big fight. Mel King and his friends want African art. The Back Bay Association wants Jonathan Singleton Copley's paintings to be. It's like, oh my God, this is absurd. We've had this incredible luck. We've won all these battles that no one could have believed. And now we're going to have a fight about art. And Anne and I actually couldn't remember 30 years ago, and now we certainly can't remember whose idea it was. But we know that one of us said, Black people are never recognized as workers in this city. Black people are always treated like welfare queens. No one ever celebrates Black people as American workers. But the reason that there's a Black community in the South End, there was then, it had displaced the West End back of Beacon Hill as the primary Black community, was that the railroads converged at the Back Bay Station. And the Pullman Porter jobs were the only jobs that Black men could get that paid a decent wage. And A. Philip Randolph was a very tough guy who organized black workers, most of the unions. I'm a pro-union guy. Most of my family were union members. I was a union member, but they didn't let black people in. This was a black union organized by blacks. It was very effective. So one of us had the idea, let's dedicate the station to the memory of A. Philip Randolph and celebrate black people as Americans who work. And it was, when we did the opening, it was one of the best openings I was ever, unquestionably the best one I was ever there. There was a Philip Randolph club of people who had literally worked lugging luggage with A. Philip Randolph 50 years earlier. They had strong social bonds. So they were all invited. They all got a medal commemorating the event. And one of the, everybody there was older than me, except one young guy, gets up and says, well, I'm here representing my father who passed away a month ago. But he went to work every day of his life. He's fed our family, and no one ever thanked him until today. It was the best moment in any of these ceremonies I've been to that Ann's idea or my idea or our idea actually worked as we hoped it would. Now they're fooling around with private sector, public-private bullshit. And they better not touch the statue of A. Philip Randolph. And I hope everybody here will demand that the new administration not screw up Back Bay Station after all the work that went into it. So that's the second piece with Ann. Then the third piece was a lot of work, get the Central Artery into a tunnel, and lots of discussion about what it should be, and there's a consensus that it should be mostly park with a couple of spots where there'll be air rights development in the historic Bullfinch Triangle area and in 3 key spots, but that mostly it's going to be a park. And there are to be one-way streets on either side bracketing it. And some people were calling it reminiscent of the Rambla in Barcelona, which is this amazing space that resulted when they tore down the wall of medieval city. And those streets are like 2 lanes wide, but 1 lane is always parked. So the pedestrians totally dominate the space. So the idea was for the green space over the artery to be like the Rambla. It was supposed to be 2 moving lanes, no more, pull-out pocket for parking, but at every intersection, a neck down, so there'd be no more than 2 lanes that pedestrians had to cross to get to the park. And Ann called me one day, put on her most imperious tone and said, Fred, your friend, I won't mention his name, in the city traffic department, every time I turn around, he adds another lane to this goddamn street. It's going to turn into McGrath Highway before we're done. This is horrible. So we got together and said, well, what are we going to do about this? Well, the problem is, this is like we got a vampire and we need a piece of garlic and a crucifix and we got to do something about it. So the piece of garlic and the crucifix that we decided was, let's dedicate the park to the memory of Rose Fitzgerald Kennedy. If we name the park for Kennedy, they won't dare to screw around anymore. Jim Aloisi was the general counsel at the Turnpike, where Ann was then on the board. Very skillful at the legislature. Got the legislation through without anyone knowing it. Well signed the legislation. About a year later, they're having a meeting with serving amber liquids in Wells' office, thinking about what to name the park, because all they thought about was what to name things. They didn't do much, but they were good at naming things. You know, a big scheme to name, not to name the Tip O'Neill Tunnel. They came up with the Ted Williams. They were very skillful at that. So they're trying to figure out what to name the park, and somebody comes in and informs the governor it's already got a name. It's been named for Kennedy's mother, and you signed the legislation without knowing it. Now, that's the nice part of the story. The bad part of the story is if you walk down to Hanover Street and cross from the government center side over to the north end, you'll notice that there are 4 lanes of traffic on each of those streets where there's only supposed to be 2. It ain't right. The environmental impact statement says it's 2 lanes each way. It's not being enforced. And if they put a BRT onto Rutherford Avenue, which won't last for 10 minutes because they don't have the drivers to run the service, it'll turn into Rutherford Avenue that's even wider than there. There was a reference to how bad Keeney Square is now. There's a pincer movement on the Kennedy Greenway. If Rutherford gets to be as wide as people are thinking about, and the Northern Avenue Bridge is rebuilt with cars, not just, it should be just pedestrians. If it's built with cars, you're going to dump so much traffic into the roadways either side of the Greenway, there's going to be pressure to widen it again. So you got to stop it before it gets in. Don't let them build that bridge, except as a pedestrian bridge, and don't let them do that to Rutherford Avenue. You got to plan this from the outside in. Anyway, as expected, I went on too long, and I apologize, but I do want to say about Walk Boston, Walk Massachusetts, what a great organization this has been since forever. And on the project many of us are involved in, Wendy representing Walk Boston, which was its name then, and I saw Jessica and Harry and Galen. Why don't you wave wherever you are? All of us have been working in Alston to get the elevated turnpike built at grade instead of as a viaduct. But not just that, it can't stop there. We've got to get real connections from Brookline BU and South Alston over to the Charles River that are pedestrian friendly. We got to get serious air rights development that is pleasant, not Newton Corner, but something that really works. That's a work in progress. We're going to need help, and Walk Boston has been a major part of the movement to make that come out right. And I just, as a resident of Brighton for the 82 of my 83 years, I just want to thank Walk Boston, Walk Massachusetts for all the help you're giving us in that. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Fred. I'm going to use my favorite line, Naja. Good evening, friends and future friends. My name is Alice Brown, and it is my great privilege to be up here tonight between my hero as well, Fred Salvucci, and another one of my heroes, Karilyn Crockett. I'm here to introduce her this evening. If you get a copy of the annual report that's floating around, you will see many of Dr. Crockett's accomplishments. She co-created My Town. She's earned graduate degrees from Yale and the London School of Economics. She's served in multiple roles at the City of Boston, including being the first Chief of Equity, and she is now on the faculty of the Department of Urban Studies and Planning at MIT. But she also wrote a book, the book that you are all going to donate to Walk Massachusetts so you can be entered into a raffle to win. And it's called People Before Highways. And what I love about this title, I realized biking over here, is that it says people before. And you could put anything after it and it would capture Karilyn. People before the BS of capitalism, or people before cars driving over things, or people before the government who wants to widen the highway to 4 lanes. Like, Karilyn's putting people before everything. One thing that she's really good at is putting people first, and she collects stories. She shares people's stories. She empowers people to share their own stories, and she leverages stories to create policy change. And I don't know what she's going to tell you about tonight, but it's going to be great. So next up, Dr. Karilyn Crockett.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. It is so good to be here. It feels like a little bit of a reunion, a little bit of a homecoming, a little bit of a rally. I'm feeling all the vibes here. It is such an honor to be in the midst of the coalition of the willing, the yes people, the go people, the do people, the advocates, the get it done people. And it is such an honor to be here with so many people that I admire so much, including Ann Hirschfang, including Fred Salvucci, people who show us what it means to come together, to be committed to vision, to be committed to purpose, to be committed to no and yes, and to always be together. So an honor. And what I understand from the program is that I also was a Golden Shoe Award winner 30 years ago. 20? No, it was 30. No, it's amazing. It is true. And I still have that shoe. It's like kind of like a dusty baby shoe right now, but it's so beautiful because it's like the future. It's like we can do it. It's intergenerational. It's walking. And I have this plaque. It's on my desk, actually. So beautiful. So really wonderful to be here again to feel the spirit of coming home. So congratulations to Walk Boston, Walk Massachusetts. Hello. Yes. For more than 30 years of righteous action and fight and yes and getting it done, and you're not even done yet, so not even close. So congratulations again to all the Golden Shoe awardees, the winners, the Merrimack Valley Fare Free Program and Bus Transformation folks, MassTrails, Fred Salvucci, all the award winners. That's a big deal. So I can tell you that this thing lasts for a long time. So hold on to it and be proud, because when I got that award, I felt powerful. I wanted to put the shoe on. I couldn't, but I felt like this is a real community here. And it's amazing to just be able to share again in the togetherness and to really recognize the fact that we have so many more victories to claim. And it feels like a really important moment to stand with that. So I'm just going to share a few remarks. Fred Salvucci absolutely gave the keynote address already, which I would hear again and listen to all day. So I want the video. But I do want to share just a few reflections that I have, particularly based on the moment that we're in right now. And so, again, recognizing all the heroes that are here, recognizing what it means to fight for years, for generations, for decades, the fights that have got us here and the fights that are to come. So the book that I wrote is a little bit about that. Hold it closer. Okay. This book that I wrote is a little bit of a love letter to the city that raised me. I grew up in Boston, a neighborhood kid, and there's just so much more to know and to say about the city. But I'm so grateful for folks like Ann and Fred who fought for me before I was even born. And so I feel like this conversation about generational change and fight is a real thing, because I'm a beneficiary of so much vision that is nested in this room and nested in the communities that we hold dear and need to support and lift up. And also, I think for me, it's really important to talk a little bit about the idea of traveling these streets that we're on and moving from desire to action, which is so much of what this organization means and is about. So really just want to reflect on that. And I think like everyone or many of us, I am full with the news of Mel King's passing as well. A true comrade, a true visionary, someone that is connected to all of us in ways that we know, in many ways that we don't. And so I wanted to just share a quote that Mel shared in his book called Streets, a poem book where that he wrote in 2009. And Mel says, "The first street I traveled was the one from my mother's womb. And my first political act was to cry for attention and get a response to my needs. This work about streets is about connections, a community reflection of the impact of the streets where I lived and where the values that would lead me to learn to take the single eye and live and shape it into a communal circle, making it love." So streets as a place of connection, streets as a place of safety, streets as a place of knowing, as home, streets as an opportunity for possibility. This is the call for all of us to think about these places and how to hold them in our hearts and to move us forward. This image in front of you shows a couple of maps with lots of dashes on these maps. The image shows an afterlife, a break, a dash, a loss, a vision of what could have been, but what was refused. These are maps showing what would have been the inner belt, what would have been the Southwest Corridor Expressway, what would have been this monstrous, disastrous set of roads that would have fundamentally changed our city and our region. But this reality of this map, of these roads, was refused because people came together and said no and said hell no. So the maps represent three different types of invisible pressures, invisible pressures at play on the screen. You see macroeconomic change and regional pressure pushing us away from industrial manufacturing and towards services, toward a different kind of economy was being suggested by these plans. An economy based on services, education, tech, and healthcare. You're seeing the signals, the mapping, signaling of region in flux. You're also seeing the invisible federal pressure to reorganize landscapes to increase car and petroleum dependency, and the formal movement toward an even more deeply fossil fuel-based economy. These lines suggest that desire working. You also see the invisible desire, even, of people who live in cities and their ability to say no, hell no, to a racially exclusive and car-dependent future, a future that was being launched in our names, but not in our interest. And so when this interstate highway was suggested to us, first in 1948, and then revised in 1962, we were presented with these desire lines. And for any of you that know transportation jargon, a desire line is a shorthand, a technical description of a place that you want to go based on where you are now and where you would want to go if a road or a route existed. So a desire line as a real thing is calling into being something that does not exist. And so we have an opportunity to kind of push beyond the desire, even the desire of transportation planners at that time, and to say what we actually want and deserve as a region. So all those dots, all those breaks, all those dashes represent desires that were refused, represent a set of roads that were refused, a set of intentions that were refused, because the people here and many people in this room, including Ann Hirschfang, including Fed Salvucci, stood up and said no and brought to us a much more inclusive, expansive future, an alternative future, which is where we stand now. So not only is this a victory for grassroots organizing and visioning, but a victory for thinking about desire in the broadest possible sense and what our vision and commitment to a different kind of future can bring. I think we're standing in this moment again now. These are 1960s renderings of what would have been, but I have read the crash report data that was released here. It is staggering. It is terrifying. It is a death-dealing synopsis of where we are. And the question is, how can we marshal a greater sense of desire, a greater sense of vision for what needs to be in this moment in 2023 and moving forward? How can this history of what we accomplished in the past be instructive for broadening our sense not only of what's possible, but what must happen and what we need now? In 1956, we know this story. So 1956 is a bell. A bell goes off for the entire country. President Eisenhower signs the Federal Aid Highway Act that unleashes this road building race 41,000 miles of roads are released, crisscrossing the country with a valuation of about $400 billion. So the vision was, how can we connect all of these cities and places around the country into a regional and national network of roads? And at the very same moment, you have a movement bubbling, a movement desiring a different kind of future at the very same time. So the interstate highway system acknowledging and speaking to a car-dependent future based on fossil fuels and automobility. 2 years before, you have the signing and the decision that would lead to Brown versus the Board of Education. So a decision by the Supreme Court to move toward racially integrated schools, a high water mark for the civil rights movement, and that unleashed so much organizing around the country about bringing back together places and communities that have been separated by race. The Federal Highway Act would do the exact opposite thing, resegregating so much of the country, separating the country physically, racially, economically. And so at this moment in 1956, you have a torque. You have a set of decisions from the Supreme Court moving the country in one direction. This decision, which was a legislative decision then signed off by President Eisenhower, moving the country in the opposite direction. And so then what do you get? Lots of fighting. Lots of fighting, lots of battles on the ground, and you get people moving to the forefront saying no, saying hell no, and standing in the gap for us. These are some of the people that stood up here in Boston to say no to these roads, to say no to a racially exclusive future, to say no to a system that did not represent our interests, but instead saying yes to something that could be more grounded in the safety of neighborhoods, more grounded in the sense of what it would mean to build viable, sustainable communities, and very much of taking on the state government, the federal government, the local government, and saying no. So some of the people that you see featured there are people in this room that you know. There's our dear Ann Hirschfang right there on your right, smiling, probably getting ready to meet with Fred or someone else, or thinking about what the next step is. We have Gloria Fox, who was there, who was very active in the Whittier Street neighborhood and became an organizer on the ground, again, refusing these roads. You have Chuck Turner, who's there, Stokely Carmichael, Byron Rushing, there's Fred, there's Tony Lee, there's Tony Pangaro, there's also David Lee, who will be so important to creating the design of the Southwest Corridor Park. And then you have people really standing here for us to signify that people, our voices, our visions, again, our desires are powerful enough to imagine something quite different. I love this picture here also of Mildred Haley, representing Mildred Haley Apartments now, but representing the tenants of the Tenant Management Corporation, who were also really instrumental in creating a new vision for what would happen for the land that was stopped. Femke Rosenbaum, many of you guys know Femke, how important she is for creating the Wake Up the Earth Festival and the Lantern Parade in JP, the Wake Up the Earth Festival as a really important marker for people to know that this road was stopped and that we were able to create a different kind of future on the other side of it. And so just reminding us not only of the power of people to stand and to say no and then move to yes, but what it means to recognize our neighbors, our networks, to create new kinds of policies and new kinds of spatial realities. The story of stopping this road, an 8 to 10 lane highway that represented $1 billion of investment that was refused, so many jobs at a time when the city and the region was in need of jobs, and a pause point. And for any of you that have been to Roxbury Crossing, you have Ann Hirschfang and Lou Finfer and others who worked so hard to make this plaque available. How many people have seen this? You've seen this? Yeah? Amazing to be able to know that the story is told here as a moment of memory and reflection for us. Because again, I know that the folks here at Walk Massachusetts are telling us that we are in another kind of moment for fighting, another kind of moment for visioning and refusing, but thinking about what we need to make our streets and cities safe across the Commonwealth. And so this is some of the aftermath of considering what that road would have looked like. So this is actually even taken from the plaque that I just showed you at Roxbury Crossing, showing what this would have looked like right around Ruggles Station. And so a rendering on the left side of what would have been, I guess, what is that, Mission Extension? Yeah, and then you're looking right up where you can see where the Prudential is, but you're right about Ruggles Station, looking at what would have been the inner belt. So that incredible, monstrous piece of infrastructure coming right through the city and choking out the air of families like Gloria Fox, who lived right off on the right side by Whittier Street and dealing with the aftermath. This did not become reality. We know the story. We know that in 1966, space was cleared, started to be cleared in Boston. So homes were lost in Boston. Homes and businesses were lost, not at the scale that would have been, but because of the vision and the fight of even the Cambridge Committee on the Transportation Crisis, where Fred and Tunney and Dennis Blackett and others came together and then met with people across the river in Boston to say no and to move us to what would be the Southwest Corridor Park and the new Orange Line. And so going through these stories are stories that we know a little bit, but the question is how? How did we get there? And also what is instructive about this particular historic moment that is continuing to inform policy and organizations that are here today. And so this notion of building through desire, mapping those desires into new kinds of landscapes and futures, and also what are those lineal descent lines of fights that we can trace. So this is an image of lots of images that are sitting on my desktop of Fred and Tunney and Tony and Ken Kruckemeyer walking through the Southwest Corridor, reflecting back on what the landscape looks like. That must have been, I don't know, that was about 10 or more years ago, Fred. And so amazing for them to walk through and talk about what they did tactically to make this possible. Remember, there were lots of memories that were shared even on that fateful meeting that was at Ann's, and they're talking about whether or not the cut should be open to let the train go through, and the decision to close, to cover the decking there, a significant decision based on activism and a significant decision because it created recreation space. It created walk space. It created a safe pedestrian landscape right in the middle of the city, a 4.7-mile park going from Back Bay Station to Forest Hills, and an opportunity to think about what's even growing there. What would the trees look like 20 and 30 years later? And the conversation about what it means to actually create a landscape that is green, that is vibrant, that is full of tot lots, that is full of gardens, that is not only livable and desirable, but considered something that people actually have a sense of ownership for. And so, again, not only a conversation about history and what happened before, but the ways that the desire and the statement of articulation of our values centered in a notion of equity. Equity as a corrective act. Equity is not something that is equality. Equity is not equality. But how can we correct for the mistakes of the past or even the almost mistakes of the past to create a particular kind of present and future that we know and we need? And so very grateful again to this organization in particular, to Ann Hirschfang and her constant fight and her constant vision about what we need as people who walk, people who live, people who breathe, but know that that is actually not constrained to a moment of now, but is always stretching into the future. And so this is my last slide, and then I can take some questions. But there is an ongoing project that a group of my graduate students and I are engaged in that's called Hacking the Archive, where we're looking at archival stories and strategies like these fights around, like the fight around the highway and even urban renewal fights, or organizing fights, and thinking about how these fights for land have trickled through the creation of other kinds of organizations related to housing, education, and economic self-determination, and how that fight and that story continues and what we can probably do about it or not. And so what I want to just leave us with is this last quote from Mel King, who reminds us in Chain of Change. He says, "It's not the physical structures or the dollar signs that count in the end, but the way people feel about themselves, each other, and the place they live." And so that's an offering for us and a remembrance to again lift up not only the fight that seems possible, but mostly the fight that seems impossible, that truly expresses the bigger sense of desire and possibility that we have for ourselves, because that is the legacy that we sit with. And I'm so grateful for. Thank you.
And we have a second golden shoe for Karilyn. Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you have a pair. That's true. I hope they match. So we are going to move into a quick Q&A as well. So to accommodate the people that are also watching the stream, you can scan the code to add questions. I hate QR codes, but the pandemic showed me they're actually useful. They are. They're super useful. So you can scan the code to join the chat, and you can add a question there. A couple people online have already added questions, so I will ask the first question, but you guys can add them there. I can also come around and have a mic for you. So Karilyn, if you want that microphone. The first question was, can you talk a little bit about what it meant to gather people once more at the State House in 2019 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of People Before Highways Day?
Yes, amazing. So there on January 25th, 1969, there's one of the images I showed is of people turning up at the State House. And so we put a call out to people who had been there on that fateful day of confronting Governor Sargent to come back to the State House. And so what was interesting is people said that when they had showed up on those State House steps on that cold January all those years ago, that they actually had not gone inside the building. And so they wanted to go inside. And so I don't even know how it happened. We sent a bunch of emails out. We got a drummer. So this guy drummed, and then we gathered in front, and then I got some grad students from MIT to make these signs that recreated the signs that were carried on the day in 1969. So all the people come. I was hoping to get 50 people, one person for each of the years of the 50 years, and 200 people came. And we gave out these protest signs, and we took the drummer and we marched into the State House, and the state police said, stop. I said, number one, drums are not allowed in the State House, which I thought was a little bit racist, but that's a whole nother story. Number two, they said that protest signs are also not allowed in the State House because they were on these big sticks. So we put everything to the side. We talked to some of the more radical activists and explained that it was okay, that this was still an okay event. And then we went in and we had an incredible series of speakers come and talk about what it had been like to be outside on the State House steps 50 years ago, including Chuck Turner, who was there, Fred was there, and I think you were there too. Were you there? Yeah, and spoke. And a lot of folks spoke. And then we also had Jack Wofford come, who was someone who, of course, with the BTPR was very engaged in the negotiations with Sargent. And we walked up to the governor's chamber, and we had Jack Wofford presented flowers to Governor Sargent's painting, and we had like a moment to just be together and recognize. It was an incredible day, and it really inspired this work around hacking the archive that I'm trying to continue. So wanted to make sure that this incredibly impressive and powerful generation of vanguard activists, many of whom now are in their 70s and 80s and have so much to teach us, and so much insight, that it is our responsibility and our privilege to be able to learn, and we need to figure out how we're using these ideas and strategies into the future. I will say that when I was in City Hall, both times I was the director of economic policy and research for the city of Boston in the Walsh administration, and then I was the director of equity. When there were protest actions at City Hall, and there were many, I don't know if they were always protesting the administration, which they may have been, or just in general, just the activism. What I noted as a policymaker was that many of the folks who were showing up to the mayor's office were passionate, but were older. We're very seasoned, and a blessing and wonderful. But as someone who was sitting in that seat of decision making or with decision makers, it made me very concerned about what the work that we're doing to build coalition, to build cross-generational learning and strategizing, and how intentional we are with that, because we're not being as intentional as we should be. And this is a moment to think about that too.
Great. Another question came in. What are the new highways today? I didn't write the question.
I didn't write the crash report, so you can talk about, I mean, there's so many, right?
I think so. I mean, I think you started talking about it a little bit in, you know, I mean, I got a little choked up. You were starting to talk about the crash report that I wrote. So like, that was fantastic.
No, it's true. So we can speak literally about the highways and roads that are issue, but I do feel like because we're in this moment where we have got to confront the emergency of climate change, that for me, that is the other side of the highway fight. That at this moment in the middle of the 20th century, we're really double down on automobility. And and the petroleum lobby was so effective and sort of convincing us that we needed to be dependent on cars and we needed all these roads. And now we're dealing with the consequences, not only of bad roads and all the traffic problems, but all the climate impacts that are implicated in this. And so I know that I'm speaking to the choir here, but in so many halls and in so many places where that's not the priority, the climate emergency and catastrophe is right before us as the next set of road disasters. I think that's fine. Let this people go.
I think that's a great idea. So I'm going to turn it over to Althea to close things out. So.
Hi again, and I promise we're almost done. I just want to grab the mic one more time for a final round of thank yous. So thank you again to everyone who has made this event and all of our work possible. In particular, I want to thank our wonderful keynote speaker, Karilyn. For your thought-provoking words, I want to thank again our Golden Shoe winners, Fred, Neva, and the MassTrails team for everything you have done to make our state more walkable. And finally, thank you to everyone who came tonight, both in person and virtually. Thanks to you, we have raised, I am told, $8,581, which does not count the matching funds. So thank you guys so much for that. You can still also donate right now. That's okay. So if you want to hand Ava a check for plus $1,000, I am told this very moment. So yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's cliche but true that every dollar counts, and will go towards our work making our state safer and more accessible. So we hope you all had a wonderful night, and thank you for supporting Walk Massachusetts. Good night, and thank you. Betsy says to take home the annual report with you. There's also buttons up at the front, and you might actually note there's new stickers in there with our new logo on it. So please feel free to snag some swag on your way out the door.
Thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate it.
So those are actually